All right, we're on.
Good evening, college basketball fans, and welcome to another episode of College Pride Press Game Day. As always, I am your host, Noah Holley, joined alongside by my co-host, Sean Bock, and special guest, Tony Patelis. We will have everybody introduce themselves in a second. So for tonight's show, we will be discussing Luke Kennard's recent tear and what it means for Duke, recap Butler's shocking loss to Indiana State earlier in the week, and of course, preview the top games of the weekend ahead. So let's get to tonight's panel. As always, my name is Noah Holley. I am a 14-year-old intern for collegepridepress.com. I cover the University of Virginia and bracketology for the site and am the proud host of this podcast. All right, let's get to Sean, who is back after missing last week. Sean, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
All right, what's up, guys? I'm Sean. I'm the chief analyst for the College Pride Press Game Day podcast, and I'm excited to be back on. I was on a retreat last week, so I wasn't able to watch any of those games or get to join the podcast, but I'm excited to be back and should be good for the rest of the year, so ready to get things rolling.
All right, we're excited to have you back as well. All right, let's get to you, Tony. Why don't you introduce yourself for us?
Sure. My name is Tony Patelis. I live in Boston, Massachusetts. I run the College Hoop News Twitter feed. I've been doing it about for 5 years now. Pretty much just a big college hoop fan who loves to talk about it, so that's why I jumped on social media. I love chatting with people and fans and all that good stuff. So, and second of all, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, awesome. You can come on anytime you want. It's a great honor to have you here.
Thank you.
Guys, be sure to go is it at College Hoop News? Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah, be sure to go give at College Hoop News a follow. It's an awesome source of college basketball information and opinions. Pretty cool. All right. Sounds good. So as always, be sure to follow us on Twitter at CPP Gameday and subscribe to us on iTunes. All right, guys, so let's get into the show. We'll go ahead and start with Duke shooting guard Luke Kennard, who has had himself a pretty darn good week, to say the least, against Michigan State, Maine, and Florida. Kennard has scored 20, 35, and 29 points, I believe. Kennard has carried this team so far this season, emerging as the guy on a Duke squad, absolutely slammed with injuries. However, with some of the injured players returning to the court recently, namely Jason Tatum and Marcus Bolden, and more and Frank Jackson, Grayson Allen, and Harry Giles on the way, Kennard's performance has raised questions about how this starting lineup will shake out with everyone back. Sean, let's start with you. What do you believe Kennard's performance means for this stacked Duke team once everyone returns to action?
Well, I mean, we knew coming out of high school that Kennard was a top recruit. I mean, I believe he was top 30 in the country in the ESPN Top 100 class 2015. But last year, kind of had high hopes for him. He had some good games. Like he scored 26 against North Carolina State and 30 against Notre Dame. And then he kind of had games where he'd score maybe 9 points and then somewhere he'd score 5 or 6 and even 0. So I think it's kind of nice for this Duke team. Well, it's very nice for this Duke team to have a player like Kennard. He wasn't very good last year, as I said earlier, but he's finally coming along and becoming the player that Coach K recruited. And especially with the injuries coming about, it's nice to see him shooting the ball at a more efficient rate. He went 5 for 7 last game, 4 for 9 against Maine. And honestly, he's just a nice asset to have because you need a guy who can score in bunches of ways. I mean, we know Kennard's a good shooter, but he also has a great ability to take it to the hole and get fouled and convert from the free throw line, where he's very good from, shooting 88%.
Nice. Yeah.
So it's definitely a huge asset, especially with we kind of thought Grayson would be the main guy this year, but really Kennard's taken on that role, and I hope his playing time really doesn't see. I hope he doesn't see the floor less when all those guys come back, because I mean he's really coming along for this Duke team and is a great weapon, especially come conference time. So it's really nice to see him step up and be the guy for Duke, as we've seen the past couple games, especially.
All right, sounds good. Tony, let's get to you. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's funny. Sean just mentioned the minutes. I actually thought he'd be the guy to lose minutes when all these other young kids come back
Same here.
from injury. I really did. But, he's playing at an All-American level right now. I mean, how can you sit the kid down? I don't think you can. He has been lights out from the start of the year to now. 20 points, 20 points a game. He's actually a very good rebounder too. People don't give him credit for that because they look at him as a scorer, but he averages over 6 rebounds a game, and he's the guy right now for them. And while these young freshmen start to come into the fold, it looks like he's going to be the guy to, like you guys said, carry him for the foreseeable future until the freshmen can get intertwined in the rotation.
All right. A quick question for you, Sean. We'll get back to you in a minute, Tony.
Sure.
How do you see this? Just how exactly do you see this Duke lineup shaking out when everybody gets back?
Well, I mean, that's Coach K probably doesn't even know the answer to that one, let alone me. Well, I hope Kennard, like I said earlier, gets a lot more playing time because, I mean, you saw him play with Jason Tatum yesterday. They played great together. I mean, I'm surprised Tatum played as well as he did. I mean, number 2 recruit coming out of high school, but he, especially a very good defensive team against Florida, he picked them apart. He had 20 points or something like that. And he was hitting fadeaway jumpers in their face and stuff. Great moves. We knew he was going to be a great player, but I didn't really expect him to be that good. And then when you have we don't really know about Giles yet coming back, so that's going to be a big question mark. And then Bolden, he played 2 minutes the other day, 2 fouls. I mean, I get it. He comes back after injury, first college game. Doesn't really do much, so I really don't know. I mean, Duke is known for only going 7 or 8 deep. So I think just the lineups, I mean, it's scary because you have McDonald's All-American. You have a whole starting lineup full of McDonald's All-Americans, and then you have 2 or 3 guys, or all your bench full of McDonald's All-Americans. So I really don't know how this lineup's going to shake up. I'm sure that Kennard will keep playing. Depends how healthy each player is, especially Grayson Allen. His health is a big question mark right now. But in the end, I think Coach K is going to figure something out, and this Duke team will be just fine.
All right, Tony, do you have any thoughts on?
Yeah, I'll tell you. Of course, I'll tell you right now. It doesn't matter about the lineup because they got so many good players. They're like I totally agree with Sean. They generally aren't the deepest team. Last year they weren't, but this year you just go down the list. And I don't really think it shakes out of who starts, who doesn't. They're gonna hurt you in so many different ways. I just don't think it matters who's starting and who's coming off the bench. He'll find his rotation. He'll figure out what he wants to do. But in the end, it's just the weapons are just endless.
All right, sounds good, guys. So we're going to move on to the next segment of the show. As you might have heard, on Tuesday night, Indiana State shook the college basketball world and stunned Butler 72-71. We'll start with you, Sean. What exactly were your reactions from this upset?
Well, I mean, it's been said throughout the week that game was considered to be a trap game for Butler. I mean, Indiana State is not a bad team. I mean, we saw with Indiana going to IPFW. IPFW was full of Indiana All-Stars, and Indiana is known to be one of the best basketball states in the country. And that team was just full of Indiana All-Stars for coming out of high school. And same with this IPFW team. I mean, it's kind of funny that the Scott who picked apart IU on IPFW, his twin brother actually had 24 yesterday against Butler, or 25, against Butler, and just seemed to put a chip on his shoulder and just carried his team. But going back to Butler, honestly, they shot the ball 55% from 3, 10 of 18. I mean, 40% from 2, but it looked at times like they were just getting out-rebounded, out-hustled. Indiana State, I mean, Butler just felt like they were going to walk out of that one with an easy W, but Indiana State really gave it to them. And as you know, there's really no easy games in college basketball. and Butler kind of just fell asleep in that one. So I hope it's not a trend for Butler. I mean, they didn't play very well on a Saturday against Central Arkansas, even though they won by 25. But this Butler team needs to realize that they need to come out every day like they did against Arizona and like how they did against Vanderbilt too, getting some big wins. But they can't sleep on games like Indiana State and picking up bad losses. So this Butler team will be all right though. They'll figure it out. Kalian Martin's a great player. I'm excited for this team, especially with the big pickup of Tyler Lewis at the point guard position, former McDonald's All-American. So I think this Butler team, they just need to know that they can't take any days off. But, I mean, it's the early season. We still got a long season ahead of us. But they'll figure something out. They'll be all right.
All right, I like it. Let's get to you, Tony. Did you have any thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I would call it an upset, obviously, but this if you've been following this Indiana State team throughout the early season, they played really well during the Advocare Invitational. They should have beaten Iowa State, in my opinion. They let that game go late, and I think that was a first round game, and then they played Stanford really tough in the I think it was a fourth or fifth place game, but they look like one of the better teams in the Missouri Valley this year. And as Sean mentioned, Scott, he's a pretty lethal scorer. So I'm not worried on the Butler end. I think this team's pretty good. I'm actually surprised how well Butler's played. As you guys know, Roosevelt Jones was such a big part of that program for 5 years. He was like the key cog for them. So I thought they might take a little bit of a step back this season, losing Kellen Dunham. But, Chris Holtman is one of the best coaches in the country, in my opinion. I don't think he gets the credit he deserves. And they're getting some pretty good balance out of their rotation right now. And Sean also mentioned Tyler Lewis. I think he's playing the best basketball of his career. He's averaging over 5 assists a game. He's not turning the ball over. So I'm not too worried about Butler. I think they'll be fine. But very good win for Indiana State and a very good win for the Missouri Valley.
All right, I got a quick question for you, Tony. So
Sure.
it's been a lot to take in for Butler faithful in this start of the season, and playing so well, and then all of a sudden they lose to Indiana State. But overall, where do you think Butler will end up this season?
I think they're a top 4 team in the Big East. If you had to ask me right now, I think they're maybe Sweet 16 caliber club for the tournament. I don't like to make tournament predictions without knowing matchups and whatnot, but if you want to give a prediction, I'd say maybe they're Sweet 16 good. It's so hard to judge teams sometimes. So early in the season. I always say this end of December, early January is the time when teams really click, and you'll see what teams are going to push on and what teams are going to fade away. But right now, I mean, you couldn't ask for a better start, even with the loss to Indiana State.
Good point. All right, I'll ask the same thing to you, Sean. Where do you see this Butler team ending up?
Well, I mean, Butler they've always been able to compete. I mean, the Butler way, playing hard, diving on the floor for loose balls, boxing out, doing all the dirty work, and just finding a way to win. I mean, all those guys are under-recruited, and just finding a way to compete with those top-tier Big East teams like Villanova and, yeah, just all them. And I really think this Butler team will be all right. Like I said earlier, the players understand what they need to do in order to win. I mean, each player understands their role on the team. They're a veteran team, except for Baldwin, who's a freshman, starts. But other than that, I mean, the question for them might be their depth, and especially off the bench. They don't really have much. Looking at KenPom right now, there's not really much coming off the bench except like Sean McDermott and maybe even Joey Brunk, a freshman, but he's been hurt lately. Other than that, I think Butler will be all right. They just need to, like all teams, stay healthy and just keep playing hard and making sure that they get some bench production, which will be huge for them come conference play.
Do you think that they have any real chance at maybe winning the Big East?
No.
Yeah.
No. Well, maybe I should bite my tongue on that one, but I don't really think so. Villanova is just too good. Josh Hart and all that. I really don't think there's a chance for them.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
I mean, they'll compete for sure, but I don't think
Yeah.
they're gonna.
All right, so we're actually going to get to Butler later on in the show. We're going to be discussing their upcoming game this weekend when they host number 22 Cincinnati. But let's get to our first preview of the night, and that is going to be Sunday's matchup. Number 21 Florida taking on unranked Florida State. That's going to be 4 p.m. Eastern on ESPNU. So Florida, they're coming off of a loss to Duke. FSU, 8-1. Sean, let's start with you. What are your thoughts on this game?
Well, I can't believe I'm excited to watch a Florida State-Florida basketball game. That's one. Well, Florida's a very good team on both sides of the ball. They're ranked in the top 25 for both offense and defense. And in their first 8 games of the season, they're very balanced. 6 different players led the Gators in scoring. And they competed very well against Duke, like we saw. No matter who they play, it's going to be a tough game, hard-nosed. But I think the key for Florida is going to be limiting Dwayne Bacon and Xavier Rothan-Mays, 2 very good scorers for Florida State, and especially Jonathan Isaac. I mean, Florida State. We had high hopes for him, top 100 recruit, great talent overall. He's kind of disappointed a little bit this year, not going to lie. I mean, he's still a young freshman, but still, Florida State fans would like to see him get going. And I think this is going to be the game for him to break out because Florida struggled against a big man like Emil Jefferson, and Jonathan Isaac seems to be a better talent. I mean, even though he's younger, I shouldn't really say he's a better talent, but from what I've seen, his skill set is a lot better than Emil Jefferson. No disrespect to Emil, but Jonathan Isaac really needs to step up this game, and I think he has a good chance because we saw Florida, like I said earlier, struggled against Jefferson. So it's going to help a lot because Florida State's winning at home too. It's going to be a great environment, and I think Florida State will win this one by 3.
All right, let's get to you, Tony. What are your thoughts on this?
Sure. Real quick on Jonathan Isaac, though, he's been out with a hip flexor the last few games, so that's something that we got to keep an eye on. I'm not positive he's actually going to play. I haven't heard anything yet. I don't know if you guys have.
No, I just thought he was doubtful for their last game.
Actually, I would like to point out something. Florida State is actually playing tonight against Nichols.
Yeah, he was doubtful.
They are beating them 61-24, which obviously doesn't mean much. But
tight game.
It's at it's at halftime. Yes, Jonathan Isaac is not starting. So
yeah.
Or playing at all. Let's get back to you, Tony.
Yeah, sure. So obviously, that's a big factor in the game. I mean, if Isaac doesn't play, it's a whole different ball game. But I think these two teams actually match up pretty well with each other. They're both very athletic. I actually agree with Sean. I thought Sean was spot on in his comment about the backcourt of Florida State. I think that's where they actually have the edge in this game. Casey Hill with Florida has been nothing but a disappointment, in my opinion, throughout his career. He really was a 5-star coming out of high school, and he just really hasn't put it together in any of his years with the Gators. So I actually favor Florida State as well. I think that the difference in this game could be the backcourt. But like I said, they're both very good on defense. I know that their numbers on offense look good, but I don't think they're as good of an offensive team as you might think Florida that is. But again, I think they match up well. They're both athletic, but I like Florida State in a pretty competitive game. But like I said, it all depends on Isaac.
Yeah, that's a good point. I got a quick question for you, Tony.
Sure.
Do you think that Florida State deserves to be ranked at all?
I do. I think they've done enough to, I had them in my poll, I think at 23 or 24. I think they're ranked hovering around that area. I don't have any issue with that. I'm not a big guy on rankings this early in the season, but I don't have any issue with it, no.
All right. What about you, Sean? Do you think that FSU should be ranked?
I haven't seen them enough to really know. I mean, yeah, like Tony said, I'm not really a big rankings guy, especially early on in the year, because it only matters about March. But
Yeah.
I mean, if Jonathan Isaac doesn't play, or maybe even if he does play, and they beat Florida pretty handily, I think they should be ranked for sure. I mean,
Yeah, definitely.
that only loss that's killing them is the loss to Temple, but nothing to take away from Temple. Temple's a very good team,
Yep.
but really this is Florida State's first big test of the year. So I think if they get the win, they could possibly be ranked. I don't know if they will, but I think they should be ranked.
Yeah, I would actually agree with Tony and have them around the 23, 24, 25 range. But yeah, so let's get to our next preview. That's going to be number 1 Villanova taking on number 23 Notre Dame. 2 unbeaten teams that are playing really, really good basketball right now. Tony, let's start with you. What are your thoughts on this game? I'll have the game information up in a minute, but yeah,
Sure.
Tony.
Yeah, obviously Notre Dame undefeated, 9-0. I think one of the top maybe 3 or 4 surprise teams early on in this season. These teams kind of, obviously Villanova is a more talented group, but I think they mirror each other pretty well. I mean, they're both guard heavy teams. I mean, Notre Dame has, that story in Beecham in the backcourt. Bonzi Colson is just playing out of his mind right now. He's averaging 17 and 11. But again, Villanova is a guard heavy team. Brunson, I'm not sure if Phil Booth is going to play. He's been out for quite a while too, but this is a very interesting matchup, and I think this was a good test for Notre Dame. We can maybe finally see where they are, because the competition hasn't been great. They did beat Colorado earlier in the season, which I thought was a pretty good win for them. But other than that, the schedule's been kind of soft, in my opinion. So I see a pretty tight game, but I'm going with Villanova in this one. They're just a more talented club.
All right, Sean.
Well, yeah, I mean, the conversation for Villanova this year has been Josh Hart and how great of a senior year he's been having, but kind of a name that you have to mention when you think of Villanova is Jalen Brunson. I mean, he hasn't really done like much in the scoring column this year, but their last game against LaSalle, he had 26 points, which, I mean, we knew he was going to be good this year, but he finally broke out of his shell a little bit and started to put up some points for this Villanova team. And I think if he can come along like he did against LaSalle, I really don't know, besides maybe Duke or Kentucky, if this Villanova team can I think they can run away with this game, especially. I think they can really give it to Notre Dame in this game with Jalen Brunson playing really well. They're a scary team to beat, and I think, especially after the game against LaSalle where they didn't play that well, Notre Dame's not really going to want to play Villanova because they're going to come out firing. So I think Notre Dame's lack of schedule and lack of strength schedule and the teams they played will hurt them in this one. So I think Nova's going to take it by 7.
All right, quick question for you, Sean. I know it's early, but where is Josh Hart on your list of Wooden Award favorites right now?
Well, we talked about this. We talked about this on the Sunday podcast. I love Josh Hart. I mean, I saw him against Purdue. He just got to the basket at ease and seemed to do whatever he wanted. So, from the outlook of a most valuable player, as in like the most valuable player for a team, I say it's Josh Hart. I mean, look at his numbers and look at the way how productive he's been and how efficient he's been. He's just been great for this team. And considering that some of our favorites like Grayson Allen, Markelle Fultz, I mean, maybe even Lonzo Ball.
Maybe?
All right, Lonzo Ball.
Put him on the list, Sean. Put him on the list.
Well, I think Josh Hart, as of now, if the season ended today, I think Josh Hart would be player of the year. Bold take, but I think he'd be it.
What about you, Tony?
I'm a Lonzo Ball guy. I mean, you can't argue with Josh Hart. But Ball has been the biggest impact guy for me. I've got to see UCLA at least a handful of times this year, and he's been the best player all around most valuable player in my opinion. But I mean, I'm not going to argue with Sean. I mean, you can go with Josh Hart, or it's just too early for me to, make a call on that. But I would probably go with Hart or Ball.
All right, sounds good. So that game will be played at noon Eastern on Saturday. That's going to be on CBS, that network's regular Saturday noon game. All right, so let's get back to Butler. We're going to be previewing number 22 Cincinnati taking on number 16 Butler. That game is going to be 4:30 p.m. on Saturday on Fox Sports 1. Sean, let's start with you. What are your thoughts on this game?
Well, I mean, Butler's going to come ready to play, especially after that Indiana State loss. But
Yeah.
Cincinnati I think they're a very good team. I mean, we haven't been really talking about them that much. They beat Iowa State in overtime, but Iowa State just got beat pretty handily by Iowa.
Yeah.
So really don't know how you can really measure that Iowa State team, but it's all about matchups. And I think this matchup is pretty even. If you look at the lineups, up and down the lineup, Kyle Washington has been Cincinnati's best player, averaging 17 points a game and has been very efficient, shooting 59%. He's also a very good presence inside, leading the team in blocks. The problem for Cincinnati, though, is that, I mean, they shoot well inside the perimeter, but they do not shoot the three ball well. They're only shooting 30% from three, which has been their lone weakness throughout the year. So I think this game is just going to be a battle up and down the court, 40 minutes of just great college basketball overall. And I think this Butler team, it's going to help that they're going to be at home at Hinkle Fieldhouse. I think they'll beat Cincinnati by 8.
All right. Tony, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, Sean kind of stole my thunder there. Thank you, Sean. With Cincinnati is probably right now might be the best defensive team in the country. They're only giving up 58 points per game, which is just ridiculous in my opinion. That's what they do. That's their game this year. They're going to limit you on offense because, like Sean said, they don't shoot the ball well. So Kyle Washington, transfer from NC State, he is gone above and beyond what I thought he'd be. For the Bearcats, like Sean said, averaging 17 and 9. I think it's a 50-50 game through and through. I do. And I would probably lean Butler being at home. But it's a tough game to call because the teams are so close. But Jacob Evans is playing well. Troy Copain has been somewhat of a disappointment for Cincinnati early on. So that's another reason why I'm kind of leaning Butler in this one.
All right. So how high are you on Cincinnati, Tony? It seems like you're kind of maybe undecided about the Bearcats, but are you that high on them?
I think they're a top 25 team. I keep them in there because of their defense. I really do. They're just a little bit limited on offense, as we talked about, and a little bit. They don't have much depth, in my opinion. So I think that might hurt them in the long run. But I'm going to keep them. They're the best team in the American Conference, in my opinion. The American Conference has been really disappointing this year with UConn playing so poorly. That conference is wide open. But yeah, I would probably put them in the 20 to 25 range, in the top 25. I respect Cincinnati a lot. Mick Cronin does an outstanding job for that program.
All right. What about you, Sean? Are you high on Cincinnati?
Well, I mean, they can easily run away with the American Conference, no doubt. I mean, it's a pretty weak conference, I wouldn't say weak, but very disappointing. Yeah. But
it's their conference.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, as we've seen in years past, like Tony said, the defense is what carries the Cincinnati team, and the phrase is defense wins championship. So I really like this Cincinnati team. The scorer in Kyle Washington, Jacob Evans is a pretty solid point guard. But yeah, I think this Cincinnati team deserves a top 25, especially if they get this win at Hinkle Fieldhouse on Saturday, because Hinkle Fieldhouse is a tough place to play, no matter how good the Butler team is you're playing. So if Cincinnati gets this win, I think they're top 25 team for sure.
All right, so let's move on to our next preview. That's going to be Michigan traveling to number 2 UCLA Saturday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN2. Michigan, it's kind of hard to say about Michigan. This is their first real test, but they've stumbled against some of the other quality opponents they've faced this year, Virginia Tech and South Carolina. So let's get to you, Tony. Do you think that they have any chance against UCLA?
Well, let's put it this way. No, I don't even think they should make the flight.
Mm.
They should just stay home. I think UCLA runs away in this game. Honestly, I think it's an easy win for the Bruins. Um, Michigan's has some. They have issues. I don't think they're a poor team, but after Irvin and Derek Walton Jr., there's a lot of holes on this team, in my opinion. I think Duncan Robinson has been a disappointment early on, and the way this UCLA team is playing, they have so many weapons. They have 4 guys on the court at a time that can score 20 points a game. Michigan has major front court issues. Mark Donnell isn't very strong. Wilson is playing okay, but I think TJ Leaf, I think Thomas Welsh have a field day in this one, and UCLA probably wins by at least 15.
All right. What about you, Sean?
Yeah, I think UCLA's speed and quickness is just too much for a Michigan team. I mean, the matchup really favors UCLA up and down the lineup. I mean, you got big guys who can score. You got guards who can take your guards who can score down low. I mean, overall, it's just UCLA is just a much better team, and we've seen that Michigan has really struggled on the road against South Carolina, especially against South Carolina. I mean, nothing to take away from the South Carolina team, but they're not on the same level as UCLA, and Michigan just got destroyed against South Carolina. And I think the same thing is going to happen against UCLA. I think UCLA wins by 15 plus, maybe even 20 plus.
All right. Quick question for you, Sean. Do you think that this Michigan team is a tournament team?
It's hard to tell, to be honest.
It is really, because they have not been impressive at all in their competition. They're not scoring a bunch.
Yeah, I mean, they played really well against Marquette and SMU, who are 2 decent teams, possibly tournament teams.
Mm-hmm.
But then you see they played Texas on Tuesday, and they barely squeaked by a struggling Texas team at home.
53-50.
Yeah. And so I really don't know. I mean, consistency is going to be an issue for this team. I mean, who's going to step up besides Zach Irvin? And we've seen Zach Irvin just take a ton of shots. And, that's the main reason why he averages, 15 points a game. But I really don't know with this Michigan team. It's still kind of tough to tell.
All right. What about you, Tony? Do you think that this Michigan team is a tournament team?
I would probably say no. I think they'll probably hover around the bubble most of the year. But like I mentioned earlier, after Irvin, after Walton Jr., it's a lot of question marks. And they're just not a good offensive team. I don't like their depth. I don't like their front court very much. There's just not much to like other than the backcourt for the Wolverines. And I just don't think they have much of a chance this weekend.
All right, I like it, guys. So let's get to our final preview of the night. That is going to be 6-1 Utah taking on 13th ranked Xavier. That's going to be Saturday evening at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Fox. All right, let's start with you, Tony. What are your thoughts on this game?
I like Xavier, especially after losing at Colorado last night. I think Xavier will be ready to play. I don't like this Utah team has a little bit of a weapons issue, in my opinion. Kind of like Michigan after Kyle Kuzma and Lorenzo Bonham. There's a lot to be worried about. They do. You got to remember though, Utah has 2 transfers that are going to be eligible in a few weeks, and David Collette from Utah State and Cedric Bearfield from SMU, a guard. So a little bit early to question how good this Utah team will be until they get those guys back. Right now, I don't think they have enough to beat Xavier. Not that Xavier is perfect right now. They have some front court issues. I think Gaston and Bernard, they're two transfers that came in this year. I don't think they've really lived up to expectations yet, but Trayvon Blewett and Edmund and Sumner and McCura, the backcourt, I think it'll be enough to beat Utah.
All right, let's get to you, Sean. What are your thoughts on this game?
The big question for Utah and Xavier is Kyle Kuzma and defend him. I mean, he's a matchup nightmare. Very good player, very long. He hasn't been a great shooter from the outside, but he'll take you off the dribble and maybe even shoot the mid range on you. But he's gonna have to play the game of his life, really. I think if Utah wants to win. I mean, Xavier's a tough place to play, and especially with the backcourt with Blewett, Sumner, and McCura. I think those guys, that's a very good backcourt. I mean, you got to give Xavier credit. They played some tough teams early on in the year, and it's like they struggled a little bit, but this backcourt is very dangerous, and I'm still buying. I'm on the Xavier train for sure. I mean, McCura and Sumner, Blewett, those guys, I would take them on my team any day, and I think the Xavier team will just run. I think they'll run away with this one against Utah.
Interesting. So it looks like that's going to pretty much do it for tonight's episode. Thank you guys for listening, and of course, thank you to Tony for joining us and helping us out.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you were great. We'll be sure to have you back on the show this year. But
anytime.
Yeah, awesome. So, like I said, be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes. It really helps us out. If you like this podcast, be sure to listen to College High Press's Sunday podcast, also on the same iTunes page. But yeah, so that's going to be pretty much it. Signing off for now. I am your host, Noah Holley, joined alongside by my co-host, Sean Bock, and guest analyst, Tony Patelis. Thank you all for listening, and good night.